have in mind, is there any particular sectors that have been particularly badly hit, and then the knock-on of that in terms of, say, future policy or future ideas of how to grow again?
Well, I suppose it's a little bit difficult to judge very clearly because the standard statistics don't really show the creative sector. But I suppose we all know that the architecture sector has been hit very badly linked with the decline in construction. And I think, I suppose, linked with that, the interior design, anything related to construction has been hit. But quite interestingly, if you look at the figures between 2008, beginning of 2008 and 2009, when we were in the recession, employment in information and communications actually increased, and employment in professional, scientific and technical activities actually increased in the Western region, which is quite, I suppose, surprising when you look. I mean, there has been a big increase in unemployment, but some of the sectors within the creative sector actually do not seem to have been hit quite as hard. So within the sector, I think that the architecture, but I also think that the arts, the visual arts, I think has been hit quite hard, because obviously it is an area that people cut back on spending. So I do know that the visual arts has been hit very hard. I think the creative technology doesn't seem to have been hit so hard at the moment. I'm sure Paul Cummins might have more to say on that later on. But it is difficult to tell at the moment. Obviously anything related to retail has been hit as well. So people who are actually selling, I think the craft sector has been hit as well.
Thank you.
Another question here?
Yeah, my name is John Healy. I represent Check and D Ideas. John Healy as an entrepreneur. I don't know where he is. But I just started up a new business in Cork, and I'm into green energy. I'm a former lecturer in CIT, early retirement, and I just started this new venture. I have a lot of ideas I want to develop. Paulie there was mentioning about green energy, that we have, you don't see it in UCC Science Building. There's a CHP, combined heat power unit. It's 98% efficient at producing heat and electricity in one go. I think that there's massive openings for that here, even in this campus. I believe the new campus over here being rebuilt. So I think it should be considered. The other thing is you talk about the rural areas there. There's in Denmark there's a massive district heating grid, and the CHP would actually feed into the grid as well if need be. But all the farmers over there, instead of dumping their bales of straw, actually burn them, and they burn their waste trees. I think they feed into the grid. So it's like I think it's time that central government had to take us on board and do something about our energy needs. And the other idea I was said about marine as well. I'm looking at an amphibious craft that will it's a boat with wheel drive that'll drive up onto the beach and take passengers for a drive around the harbour rather than depending on tides. So that's the ideas for you anyway. Jackie, thank you.
Just in relation to the green sector, the WDC, another area actually is the area of wood energy, and we've just received funding from a European MPP project to look at the area of developing the wood energy sector within the Western region. So looking at areas like combined heat and power, and also wood heat within commercial operations.
Hi, my name is Mary Hawkesby from Burn County Bar. I just want to comment on I think it's great that this study has come out and so on. But I find it difficult that things it's all rather segmented. People looking at the creative industry sector and various sectors, and obviously the economic benefit from that I know is important. But I think what we need to be looking at, particularly now, and obviously this is what this gentleman is doing, is just how do we develop creativity across the nation. And I understand your predicament in delivering somebody else's paper and so on, but the notion that in order to justify any expenditure on the arts, it has to be commodified into economic return actually upsets me deeply. I just think because we're just going down the same route as before. creativity is coming from a different space, or it isn't only academic knowledge. It's knowledge that's not only the brain, it's also a heart and a gut intelligence. And until we acknowledge that and develop policymakers who will be immersed in this kind of way of looking at the world, and who approach their policy making from a creative perspective, and have the knowledge and the background to be able to do that, then we're putting a square peg in a round hole again. You know, I mean, we need, clearly at this moment of economic crisis, is when we need creativity more than ever. We need to be looking at green technologies, we need to be looking at wherever the creative ideas are emerging. And I think it's, you know, really the notion of an integrated policy that maybe would lie not only in the Department of Arts. You know, creativity doesn't belong only to the arts. I mean, they're particularly creative in a particular way, but everybody's creative in some way. So, you know, it needs to be in education, I think, hugely. I mean, education needs to be looked at, and how are we developing a creative people in our country. It's done fairly well, as we said. In the primary sector, it gets knocked out of them in second level big time, and then there isn't much space for it as well at third level. So I think we're looking at the whole process of education, what kind of people we're creating, and how we create creative thinkers and a creative workforce. And surely there has to be some room for creativity in the policymakers, because otherwise I think we're not going to.
Well, I completely agree with everything you said. As I said, the expert group on future skill needs 2 weeks ago produced a report. I don't know if you've seen it, on the skills needs for creativity, design and innovation. Now I know that that's been on the cards for we've been working on it for quite some time. But what's quite noticeable in that is they don't hardly mention the arts. I've only read a section of it, but it's very much on the broader element of creativity and innovation in science, and about breaking down barriers between the various sectors, but between business and science, between various ways of thinking. And again, they say, you know, obviously primary school is actually quite well served in terms of creativity. And one of the recommendations we actually included in our report was that in the same way the primary schools have a green flag, that you could have a scheme for a creative flag. So schools would, you know, there would be a program to actually stimulate creativity, and that the children could, you know, work towards getting some sort of sign that we are creative. So, you know, just, I think, and I think the Science Gallery is a very good initiative in terms of bringing together science and the arts, but I think that there is a very fundamental issue, I think, at second level, really, and I think that is something that seriously needs to be looked at if we're looking at, not just for the creators, but for our economy into the future. If we don't have creative thinkers, I don't know. You know, it's very difficult to see across any sector where we want to go forward. I definitely agree with that.
Just as well, I suppose if we had the alchemist stone of how to develop creativity, you know, we would need any reports or commissions or anything. But I think we just have to do it in various segments. And when I mentioned that sometimes we have to give a hook of economic growth or the contribution of the creative sector, we're just using it as a mechanism to get funding for the Arts Council, the Film Board, the National Cultural Institutions. Now, so I think that the question then would be whether that funding is worth the quid in relation to the creative sector. Because the commoditisation and the link to economics is just a mechanism to get these sectors and the art sector generally funding. So the issue would be really is whether that funding is of any use in the development of creativity. I think it is. I think I think the Arts Council has done very significant work around the country. I think the Film Board and its economic success is an indication. But it's just, and it's only one element of it. And because the thing with creativity is that it won't go into any box. It's very wide, and different efforts are being made, like Science Gallery, which will link, trying to link art and science. And so you have a lot of things that are making small contributions, and and some of them are sort of experimental. You don't really know. You just have to see how they work. And the education sector obviously makes a huge contribution, and we probably should make changes there. But I think that there's no one overall answer, and I think maybe to say that because the sector doesn't provide the overall answer, it's not doing its bit. I think we won't have any kind of big way to develop creativity. It'll all be interlinked. And I think that the fact that now, we say even the artistic side, which hasn't prerogative either on creativity, but it's certainly recognised as an area where it kind of gives space to creative ideas, etc. That now is blurring with other areas. So it's all part of a developing whole. And what we're trying to do is trying to get funding and trying to ensure that the funding is maintained for certain areas that have been shown to make a contribution. Not the full contribution, but if they weren't there, there would be a reduction. So it's just one of the elements, and but each area has to focus on its own elements and try to develop and play its role in that way.
Okay, just one more question, because I'm conscious of time. So,
sorry, I spoke to you before, so I don't want to have the thing, but I just want to explain. I'm not academic, but I have my own business. I have had a few successes, and I've had a few failures. One of my failures was in the 1993, and I finished by posing a particular question as to why it failed, because I have a major question for the authorities at the end of it. I thought I'd been innovative when I established a thing called e-leisure cycling. It was part of a tourism thing, because I had spent 6 months with Shannon Development, and I was studying tourism. I came up with a number of ideas. One was e-leisure, and it was designed as a rural type of thing. So my first venture was to create an e-leisure. E was for eco, E was for education, and E was for environmental. And it was for everybody. And my tour, which took about a month to decipher and put together, it started at Galway Cathedral. There was 2 different versions. It was a 15-mile cycle. Went through the university here. It visited Blanket Bog, visited thatched cottages. It visited hurley fields. So people had their lunch in a farmhouse with chickens. It headed around and sitting on the bales. And over the period of 1993, we had 22 tours. We took people that sometimes had never sat on a bicycle from when they were young, because up until that, or Falch thought cycling was only for the purest cycle. So we were proving it for everybody. So at the end of the trial period, in came the European Directive on Package Tourism, and it ended up being that you couldn't run a thing like what I had unless you had an insurance bond, which would be about 10,000 for any startup business. And so I was left with a dilemma. What do you do now? So I went back to Ireland West, and I told them what my story was. And I recommended that they, in turn with other agencies, would form a policy, or some kind of block policy, where I and other small people trying to start up something could buy into it. Because other places in other countries had done. I checked some years later, nothing was done. I checked earlier this year, nothing was done. So there's my question. How can small businesses operate and start up such a thing? Because you cannot do those things anymore unless you have public liability insurance. And that was never mentioned in any thing that I saw put up there today. It's a vital necessity. You cannot do it anymore, and because the risk is too great. We're in a compensation culture society, and maybe the Western Development Commission might do something where other agencies have failed. That's all.
Okay.
I suppose in terms of the work that we did, the insurance actually wasn't raised as we reported the issues that businesses gave to us, and insurance didn't seem to be an issue that was raised. Maybe it's because most of the businesses we were talking to didn't actually have, they weren't actually dealing directly with the public, so it just didn't come up in our research, and that's why it wasn't.
By the way, what I was creating was a model for anywhere in Ireland. So what could have been created could have been transformed. That was part of my development plan at the time. And just a final note on that. I'm not going to do the same again. I lost a lot of money last time on it. But I do see another opportunity